Okay, I'll just get started while people are kind of trickling in. But hi and welcome. Glad you're here for our second Guelph Rain Garden Rebate Program webinar. Just a reminder that tonight's webinar is going to be recorded, and then we'll circulate a link to all attendees who have registered after, usually within a week. We'll also be monitoring the Q&A panel, answering questions throughout the webinar, so feel free to pop any questions you have in there, and either Ryan or I will try to answer them, or we'll have some time at the end also to answer some more questions. So fundamental to our talk tonight is the important role of watersheds in our lives and how we can be better stewards of our land to protect the invaluable functions that watersheds provide for a healthy life here on Earth. So where I'm located in Waterloo region in the Grand River, we're actually located on the traditional territory of Indigenous peoples, including the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral peoples. We recognize the enduring presence of the Indigenous peoples with whom we share this land today and their contributions to our community. So if you haven't heard about Reep before, we're an environmental charity that's been helping people in Waterloo region and Guelph live sustainably for over 25 years now. Our mission is to empower the community with practical tools, knowledge, and capacity for action to make sustainable living the norm. We have programs on home energy efficiency, water conservation, healthy yards, and waste reduction, which all aim to empower participants to take some sort of climate action. So I am Taylor Ross, and I manage the Stormwater and Healthy Landscapes programs at Reep. And I'm also joined by Ryan DeJong, who is one of our Healthy Yard advisors, and he works directly with participants in our Guelph Rain Garden program. So we're lucky to have his expertise with us today. And I'll just plug some other programs that we also offer in Guelph. So we have our backyard tree planting program in partnership with the city. It's a subsidized tree planting program where our certified arborists will come to your yard and help you pick out a native tree that's suitable for you. And we also provide the full planting service and then provide a care guide as well after planting. And also related to this webinar tonight, we're organizing a rain garden walking tour in the month of June on June 7th. So if after tonight you're super excited to learn more about rain gardens and you want to see some in person, this tour offers stops at local Guelph residences that have built gardens actually through this rebate program over the past few years. So if you follow along on our social media, or we have a newsletter that'll be updated with the event details as well. So for tonight, we'll just talk about a quick overview of why rain gardens are an important strategy in our toolkit to help municipalities combat climate change. And then Ryan will go into the Guelph Rebate Program and how it works. And then we'll go through how to construct a rain garden and what your next steps are. So something that has been on our minds is how to adapt to climate change on a local level. We've been seeing the impacts of climate change already as it relates to more frequent storms, hotter days, and more extreme weather. And we can expect it to get more severe as we approach 2050. So how do we typically manage stormwater in those wetter, wilder conditions? Well, prior to development in Guelph, a healthy watershed existed where rainwater would fall on the land, and some of it would be intercepted by trees and plants. Some of it soaks into the soil on the ground and into our groundwater aquifers. And then once the ground is saturated, any excess rain would then flow into a stream and a creek, and ultimately the Grand River. So forests, soils, plants, and wetlands, they existed throughout the watershed to slow rain down, soak it up, and filter it before it reaches our groundwater aquifers or rivers and lakes. However, as cities have developed and sprawled, we've been paving over the pervious surfaces like the forests and plants and ground cover to create things like our homes, roads, sidewalks, and other urban infrastructure, which are all super necessary for society but aren't as good at managing stormwater. In our current stormwater system, water falls onto our houses and our yards and flows down our driveways into the streets and stormwater pipes and then into our creeks and waterways. So very little is actually absorbed into our groundwater aquifers. This system is inelastic and impervious and provides no way for runoff to slow down, soak into the ground, or even filter out contaminants. So all those benefits that we saw on the last slides of forests and vegetation providing water quality and flood control are virtually gone in an urban environment. And so when we add these frequent, long, and intense rain events, all that stormwater is entering our stormwater system that isn't built to handle the extra capacity, carrying the fast-moving, high-volume runoff and pollutants, which can then cause erosion and damage wildlife habitat at the end of the pipe, as depicted in the image. And similarly, surface flooding is already increasing and expected to do more so, primarily due to our overwhelmed drainage systems and our propensity to pave over those absorbent natural surfaces. But the good news is there are tools that we can use. So by soaking up and managing the rain in our yards and at the source, as we call it, we can allow it to filter through and recharge our aquifers and alleviate some of that stress on our stormwater systems at the end of the pipe. The system allows us to mimic the natural water cycle by using soil, topography, and plants, such as in rain gardens, so that we can reduce the amount of runoff that's entering our local waterways. And then the water that does end up there is actually cleaner. So, why we're all here tonight to talk about rain gardens. So, what is a rain garden? A rain garden is a shallow, sunken garden that is built to capture and absorb stormwater runoff. As we've seen in this example, stormwater is coming from this home's downspout. It's a little bit hidden behind this bush, um, but it is directed into a shallow garden area where it slows down and soaks into very sandy soil. Any excess water that can't be absorbed during like a heavy rain event, for example, will then flow out of the rain garden through this outlet here. So in this picture, we can see some of the key components of a rain garden, which Ryan will discuss more in detail later. But we see the inlet where the water enters, the rain garden base where the water is held during a rain event, the plants around that uh, help absorb all the water. We have an outlet as well, and then you can have kind of a berm on the side to keep the water inside. So in the case of our urban water cycle, stormwater that falls onto our roofs is then directed down through our downspout into our rain garden, where it's able to retain and slow down and filter water to infiltrate better into the soil in our groundwater. And then we also have some evapotranspiration happening through the plants in the garden as well. And a rain garden that's sized correctly and is functioning properly will fill up with water during a rain event, but it's supposed to completely drain within about 24 hours after the event. We often get questions about rain gardens breeding mosquitoes, but if your rain garden is doing its job and draining properly, you shouldn't have any issues because mosquito species require 5 to 14 days of stagnant water to complete their life cycle. Okay, now just into some benefits of rain gardens if you're not sold yet. Aesthetics, so enhancing the beauty of our yards and our neighborhoods. It helps to improve groundwater by increasing the amount of rainwater that filters into the ground, recharging our local and regional aquifers. Provides valuable habitat for birds, butterflies, and beneficial insects. Reduces pollution, like lawn fertilizers and pesticides and oil that can leak, and other fluids that can leak from cars that wash off our roofs and our paved areas. And then also flood prevention. So we're protecting communities from flooding and drainage problems around us. So since we've started this program in partnership with Guelph in, I think it was 2021, we've helped to build 130 rain gardens that have created the capacity of over 250,000 liters of stormwater annually. So all that water that's not entering our stormwater system, but is then being, yeah, sent into our aquifers to recharge them. So we've had gardens all over Guelph. And Guelph residents, they're able to receive a rebate for up to $2,000 to cover the costs associated with building your rain garden. So the rain garden, or sorry, the rebate amount is calculated based on the amount of water your rain garden is designed to hold, which ends up being about 50 cents per liter that it holds. So some qualified materials or costs are mulch, sand and compost mix, small rocks, gravel, native plants, downspout extensions, and then some contractor and landscaper fees as well. So through the program, you'll work with a rain garden advisor, probably Ryan, or our other advisor, Nicole, throughout the whole process to ensure that you have a beautiful and functional garden. So I'll pass it over to Ryan, our advisor, who will tell you more about the process.
Great. Thanks, Taylor. Yeah, so I'm one of the rain garden coaches, and now I'm going to get into a little more of the details about the actual rebate process and how to build a rain garden. So yeah, looking at this flow chart, there's a number of steps, but the first thing I'll say is that we're going to guide you through each step throughout this whole process. So as long as you're keeping track of your emails and whatnot, you're going to get to the finish line. So step one, everyone's doing well so far. Attend the webinar, and then you'll book your first rain garden visit, and then that's when I come by or Nicole, and we discuss things like where to put it and more, like answer more questions. But we'll get into that in a second. And then after that, you're going to receive a report from us, and that's going to have all the information you need to apply for what's called a pre-approval application. That's to the city. And then once you've been approved, by the city, then you can start building your rain garden. And then if you feel stuck along the way, you can book a build phase visit with us, and that's optional. Um, and then once you think it's done, then you contact us again, and then I'll come by for a verification visit. And that's just to make sure it's built to um, the size that we specified, and that it's going to function okay. And then once you've been approved by me or Nicole, then you can submit your photos and receipts to the city. And then a little after that, you'll receive a nice check in the mail. So yeah, just to summarize, the three type of visits that you'll get from us. So there's the initial visit. That's where we go into detail about where to put the rain garden, the design, and just answer any more questions you have. The build phase visit is where we come by mid, construction. So you've hopefully started digging the hole and done stuff like that. So I can give you further direction. And then the final visit is when, again, I check it and you're approved. So yeah, we're going to get a little more into the details now of like how we go about thinking about the design, and kind of how we're going to tailor the design to your yard. So we're going to kind of go through all these main points in the next slides. So first thing, site analysis. This might actually be the trickier part of the whole process, but we're going to help you with this. So looking at things like root zones, distance from foundation, where is the best spot to put the rain garden? That's what we'll do with the first visit. Um, yeah. So root zones, uh, most of us have trees in our yards, and so we want to be sensitive to those. Certain trees have more extensive root systems than others. We really try to avoid, building rain gardens close to the crown or drip line of a tree. But if we do have to like hit a couple of roots, that is okay, as long as you do like a very clean cut so that the roots can heal. But again, we really don't want to hit roots so we don't have to. Underground utilities. What we advise is that you order your locates from Ontario One Call, and that will just let us know, okay, where are the gas lines, hydro, and internet cables. For the most part, it's going to be the internet cables that are um, we're most worried about because the gas lines are deeper than what we're digging for the rain gardens. But it's still very good to be aware of, what's underneath there. And then the distance from foundation. This is just a good precaution just to make sure that there's no water damage to your house. Um, yeah, 3 meters or 10 feet. For the most part, your downspouts drain kind of right by your foundation anyway, so the rain gardens will actually be pulling water away from your house, which is an added bonus to this whole um, project. But it's just a good precaution to follow. Yeah, so as I mentioned, you can order your locates from Ontario One Call. It's a free service. They'll come mark your lawn um, and give you a report. And the other thing we ask that you do is check your soil before the first visit. It's not, totally mandatory, but it is helpful. And we'll get into that in a second, what we mean by that. So yeah, so we're wondering, okay, what is the soil like? Is it sandy? Is it clay or loam? Again, I'll help with this. I have a little soil probe that I'll kind of inspect your yard with, and that will kind of guide our plant selection. But the most important thing is knowing how well does your existing soil drain, because that's going to inform what rain garden design approach we use. Yeah, so that brings us to the infiltration test. So I'm just gonna let this video kind of speak for itself, and then I'll summarize it in a second. Yeah. So yeah, we're missing a little bit of fun music there, but that's okay. So just to summarize, you dig a hole, you fill it with water, you let it drain completely so that the ground below it is saturated, and then you fill the hole with water again, and then you measure the distance that it drops. And by knowing that distance, then we have the rate per hour that water drains. And then that will tell us if you have either well draining or poorly draining soil. Um, and then with that information, then we can determine what kind of rain garden design we're going to go with. And we'll get more into like the actual soil in a second and in like relation to the infiltration test. But then get into like a bit more math here. Um, so this is like the actual rain garden sizing. Um, so again, I'm going to help with this with my report that I send you. So essentially, how we size the rain gardens is we look at how big your roof area is and how much that roof is going to the downspout that is then feeding the rain garden. So, for example, if you have, you know, two downspouts on your house, um, and you're putting a rain garden on one side of it, only half of your roof is going to be draining into that rain garden. And so we build it about 10% of that roof area. So if your one roof side was 40 meters squared, then your rain garden would be 4 meters squared in area. And again, we're going to help with this. So this is just to kind of give you some context of how we kind of go about things. Another thing to kind of wonder or think about is exactly how do you get water to your rain garden? Um, it's not going to be a rain garden or it's not going to be wet just because you dig a hole. We have to find a way to bring water towards it. So the most common way is if you just extend your downspout into the front of your yard, into the rain garden. Um, if, for example, though, you have like a main pathway in between your rain garden and the downspout, you might want to install what's called an arbor, which is essentially a wood beam that goes above the pathway and then down, and then you actually guide your downspout along that. There's ways to make these look quite, beautiful. You could, add some clematis, let's say, or other kind of creeping plant on the arbor. And if you want to get also fancy again, you could have a rain barrel in between your rain garden and the downspout. And in this way, any like excess water in the rain barrel could be used to drain into the rain garden. And this is another common question we get. There's no one shape for a rain garden. It's pretty much dependent on your yard and what is going to fit the area best. Probably the most common would be like a circular or kidney beaned shaped rain garden. But again, there's no one shape. And this is another just kind of visual to show you that. Okay, on the left we have a very linear kind of rain garden, almost like a swale. But it's quite beautifully done alongside a driveway. And then on the right, more of a curvy linear rain garden with like kind of a rock channel in the middle. And these diagrams here, this is probably the most common mistake I see people do is we tell them the depth to dig the rain garden, and we're going to get into that in a second. But they get very obsessed about the depth, and then they kind of dig like this perfect square. Um, and the reason why it's not good is because you can't plant into the slopes then. So what I really want is like a nice gentle slope. The depth that we tell you is just in the center point, and then it gradually goes up towards the sides. And now we're going to get again into the details here. So as I was talking earlier about the infiltration test, so you're either going to have what we define as well-draining soil or poorly draining soil. For the most part, you're likely going to have well-draining soil for our standards. And in that situation, we ask that you dig 40 centimeters So you dig that pit 40 centimeters deep and remove the soil, and then you add 10 centimeters of compost and then 10 centimeters of mulch on top of that. And if that was confusing, again, we're going to go over it in the first um, initial visit that we have with you, and also the build phase if you have more questions. And here's the example for poorly draining soil. So for poorly draining soil, we have to amend the soil because it's not draining well. You likely have really bad clay or fill. So in this situation, you have to dig the pit 80 centimeters deep, and then you add what we call a rain garden soil mix. That's mostly composed. It's composed of sand and compost, and that's 50 centimeters deep. And then once you've added that, then you add 10 centimeters of mulch on top of that. And just to get into the rain garden soil mix again, so the composition is about 60% sand and 40% compost, organic compost. So you can either mix it, in wheelbarrows before you put it in the pit, or you could kind of put it in separately and then mix together, kind of like you're, adding milk to your coffee, and you're trying to get that even consistency. Um, and yeah, so that's the compost mix. And this is just to ensure that your rain garden is going to drain well and it's not going to, flood your yard when it rains. So now we're going to get to a little case study example of our former director who built one at her property. So this is the top view. If you look bottom right, you can see that infiltration pit kind of in the front of that shrub. And that is where we're going to build the rain garden. That's probably the most common spot that rain gardens will be built. But they can kind of exist on any part of your yard as long as we can get a water source towards it. This is another view, ground level. This is where the downspout was pointing before it was moved into the rain garden. And then top view again, this is getting into the math. So what they did is they got the total area of the house, which was about 10 meters by 11 meters. And so that gave us the total area. And then they found that the number of downspouts was 4. So each downspout was taking a quarter of that area. And again, this is just to help with size in the rain garden. But we'll be giving the size. So this is just to kind of give you more information about how this is done. And so each downspout was taking about 30 meters squared or 29 meters squared um, of area. And so using the 10% rule, the rain garden was then sized to be 2.9 meters squared or 3 meters squared in area. And this photo on the left is a good example of just outlining the site. So you can use, pool noodles, hoses, rope. There's even like temporary spray paint. And this is just to help you get the dimensions out before you start digging. And this is top view again. The green is the rain garden area, and then the lime green outside of that is kind of the outer berm area. But that's kind of the planning process here. So this is when they started digging and shaping it. I actually find that removing the grass is the hardest part. Uh, there's several ways to go about removing grass. You could um, put cardboard on your lawn for a couple weeks, or you could rent like a sod cutter. But for the most part, it's not going to be a huge area. So if you were to just wet your lawn with your hose and then kind of sliced underneath it with like a flathead shovel, that's a good way to get rid of the grass. Um, but in this photo, you can kind of see the shape coming into play. Uh, it's maybe hard to show the depth, but you can see the berm on the outside. And in the next couple of photos, we'll see a bit more of the shaping. So this is another rain garden. On the left, you can see them kind of getting that grade going. And then on the right, they added mulch and plants. Um, you can see actually Becca in the back, she's using a rake. And a rake is a good way to kind of get a very smooth, nice gentle slope after you've done the hard digging. And here's a really nice photo of Becca's finished rain garden. So you can see the inlet on the top left. It's a very kind of small hose, but that's coming from the rain barrel. But that could also be a downspout instead. And yeah, you can see the basin, the outlet, and the plants. Um, and we can get into more details about materials, um, maybe in the Q&A. But this river rock, the size of it that works best is 1 to 3 inch, and you can get those in bags at most landscape supply stores. And Taylor's going to take it away now with planting design.
Yeah, thanks, Fran. Yeah, so now kind of the fun part, which I think the planting design. So rain garden plants are unique in that they're adapted to thrive in fluctuating moisture conditions. So both periods very wet during like our storm event, then also very dry during our like typical summer months. So we actually did just have a question about if you could have a rain garden in a shady spot, and you definitely can. There are a lot of great shade tolerant native plants that will work well in a rain garden. So yeah, many native plants are particularly well suited to these conditions, and we suggest them for a rain garden. So yeah, in this diagram, you can see the biomass of many familiar native plants that you might know, both above ground and below ground compared to grass, which is on the far left, our classic kind of Kentucky bluegrass. So the biomass above ground in our native plants helps to intercept that rain and prevents it from even reaching the ground. And then those big complex root systems help to soak it up and retain, allow rain to be transpired back up through the plant and then also into the atmosphere. And they're also great for carbon storage, soil erosion, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, the first thing that we want to think about, or the first tier of things to think about when we're selecting our plants are soil conditions, light, and mature size. So going through this process, you should know what your soil conditions are if you've done an infiltration test or you've had to amend the soil in any way. But you also want to make sure that you're observing the light conditions. So if you have less than 4 hours of sun, you probably have a shady yard. Between 4 to 6, you have partial shade, partial sun. And then if you have more than 6 hours of sun, you would have a full sun yard. So certain plants like, yeah, certain light conditions. You also want to make sure that you're planning for the mature size of the plants, especially using native plants. They can get very large. So you want to make sure you have like a scale diagram that reflects the full grown size of your plants. So you're placing them correctly and allowing them to have enough room to grow. Another thing to think about is where you're putting your plants within the garden itself. So, since it is kind of a sunken bowl shape, the base of the garden will have the highest moisture level. So, there are certain plants that do better in like a higher moisture environment than others. So, you want to think about what you're putting in the base of the garden versus like the slope or the side of a garden. And to help you along in this process, we've created a rain garden plant list that you can access from our website. And I'll also send it kind of in the follow-up email with the recording. But this is just one page from the list, but you can see some plants that are suitable to use in a rain garden. And we've actually added the mature height, the light requirements, and then these S and Bs. So the S stands for the slope or side of a garden, and the B stands for base. So we know that spotted Joe Pyeweed would do well in the base of a garden, whereas pale purple coneflower might be better along the sides of the garden. There's also other important information. Yeah, like mature size. I already said that. But yeah, also shrubs will look great in a rain garden too. But shrubs do get a lot larger than your classic perennials. So you might want to think about getting a native cultivar of the plant just so that you're able to, yeah, keep it kind of contained within your garden or if it's in front of your window, for example. So the second tier of considerations when doing a planting design include your seasonal interest, texture, referring to like the size of the leaves or the complexity of a flower, your bloom color, and then your leaf color. Here in this picture, there's a yellow twig dogwood, which you can see some yews in the background. So this shows a few of the fundamentals. So there's varying but coordinated color and also some great winter interest. So the garden has a lot of shade-loving perennials which pop up shortly after. And so these plants kind of hold the bed together throughout the entire year as the perennials are blooming. Yeah, so seasonal interest. We want to make sure we're planting a garden not just for a certain like small blooming time, but that we're keeping it going all through the winter. Also great for our pollinators to have access to habitat and food throughout the varying seasons. So echinacea is a great example that looks really cool in the winter, and the seeds provide a lot of yeah, nutrients for our birds. This is switchgrass that turns a really cool amber color in the fall. And then, of course, our twig dogwoods this is red twig dogwood, has the green foliage kind of in the blooming season, and then has a really cool red twig kind of art structure in the winter. So also texture. These are two pictures that we took on a hike recently that capture texture really well. Um, so you can see in the left here, these are May apples next to some fine wood asters. And then on the right, you have a broad textured trillium next to some ground cover like fern. But if you had maybe the mayapple and the trillium next to each other, you kind of lose the interest of both of them just because they are such a similar texture. But having those opposite textures together allows each plant to really pop and you get to appreciate both. Also looking to nature as a muse, so there are certain natural pairings that you'll find out in the wild color-wise. So goldenrod and aster, the yellow and purple, going back to that kind of complementary color wheel. They're both fall blooming colors, late season blooms, and they're really vital for our migrating pollinators and monarchs. In this garden, again, with the purple and yellow, we have some echinacea and some brown-eyed Susan. And I think that's Liatris or blazing star in the back there. And then in the right here, you can see varying colors of green, um, shades of green in a garden that look really great together with different pops of purple throughout. So I think they have some alliums and a lilac tree, and then yeah, some different things on the ground as well. So going back to Becca's case study garden, so she decided to use her conifer hedge as a backdrop and then place three nativar red twig dogwood as kind of the foundation of her garden. And so then when she wanted to add species to the basin of her garden, she chose Joe Pyeweed towards the back. It gets a little bigger, and then a mix of blazing star and blue flag iris throughout the middle. So kind of keeping a certain color theme, allowing each to, yeah, pop in their own section. Also, clusters of odd numbers are great for planting designs, just an easier way for pollinators to see them and then also kind of appreciate them as they grow together. So along the sides of her garden, she added mostly natives, but also some of her other kind of favorite plants. So she added groupings of little blue stem, some ostrich fern, bee balm, some asters, butterfly weed, and then lady's mantle, which aren't really in her garden, rain garden at all, but they just kind of balance out the other side of her garden and then also kind of the texture of the natives that she's using. So yeah, this is what her garden looked like when it was first planted. So these are kind of when they just came out of the pot or the plug and they're in the garden. But yeah, they fill beautifully in the space. And also something you want to think about before you're building is making a plan for maintenance as well. So some key tasks are to water your plants in the first 2 years as they get established. As the roots grow out, you want to replenish mulch in your garden annually, or at least check to see if it needs to be replenished. Some perennials may need to be divided and thinned out after a few years to encourage continued blooming. And then also some seasonal maintenance tips like in the spring and fall, you want to clean out your inlet and your outlet for leaf debris and sediment or ice and snow to make sure that water is actually able to enter the feature and do its job properly. And then also just a visual check. So during or after a rain event, you can check for signs of erosion and then also plant health if some plants need replacing. Yeah, as every garden's kind of an experiment and some will do better than others. So yeah, you're able to request your first rain garden visit today. This is a first come, first serve program. So we still have a bunch of spots for this year. But yeah, so if you go to our website or Guelph's website, guelph.ca/rain garden, you're able to request a visit, and then Ryan or Nicole will come out and get you started on your garden. So now we can pop into a Q&A chat. If there are any questions, Ryan and I can answer them live. If not, we have a bunch of resources on our website as well. Um, yeah, that you can take a look at too. Okay. One question. Is it possible to incorporate the rain garden and rebate into a larger garden project, or should this be handled separately? Mhm. Okay.
Um,
Yeah. Or sorry, Ryan, yeah, you go ahead.
uh, I would say like it happens pretty often that people are trying to do a full overhaul of their yard. And the rain garden is one part of it. Um, so you could totally do both at the same time, but the rebate will only cover just the rain garden area. So you would have to kind of divvy up, okay, these plants were for the rain garden and the other plants were for outside of it. Um, yes, that's how I would answer it.
Okay, and someone else asked about if they have to reapply for a visit now that they've seen the webinar. Yes, you do have to apply. We'll have to get your information so that our customer service representative can contact you to schedule the appointment. So that's either on Guelph's website or on reep.ca/, rain garden coach. Will be on there as well.
And something I would just say is that even if you're like a new gardener, I'd say like anyone can do this. Or okay, maybe like that's a stretch, but
Mhm.
most people can do this. Like I said, the hardest part is removing the grass, and then the rest is kind of removing the soil but shaping the rain garden. Um, and so if this feels like we gave you a lot of information today, um, like don't worry, we're gonna help you through each step, and answer any questions that come up.
Okay, someone else asked about the rebate. Yeah, it is only available to Guelph residents since it is funded through the City of Guelph. So only within the city boundary.
There's a question about a Norway maple.
Mhm.
Yeah, those are a real kind of pain, uh, especially because those roots are quite near the surface and quite extensive. Um, and so you have to be pretty careful about those, especially if it is like a city tree. So when I see Norway maples, I kind of dissuade people from trying to do any digging around them just because it will be quite challenging. But maybe we can just book a first visit and then we can assess how far the rain garden would be from the tree and see if it actually is possible or not.
And then also I think, yeah, similar for a black walnut. Like you can definitely plant things under a black walnut, but for the rain garden itself, you wouldn't want to be too near the root zone. So depending on, yeah, the space. So it's probably best to have that first visit and kind of Ryan can help you space out where the garden would go.
Yeah. And yeah, like black walnuts are again another big challenge. But there are like many native plants that are pretty tough and that could potentially put up with the walnut. So we could always just give it a go and see what happens. Um, there's a good question about um, basement flooding and hoping that the rain garden will help kind of pull water away from the house. Um, so yeah, rain garden can do that, especially if you're extending your downspout. The main thing about that would be to just be aware that, is the surrounding grading kind of draining away from your house? Because if there's like an upward slope, um, uh, going towards your house, that's kind of a tough challenge. But the other aspect to that question, is that, um, kind of orienting your downspouts is a really good idea. Um, so you could consider changing where your downspouts are on your house, and putting them in a more favorable location, where a rain garden could be positioned. So if your downspout is kind of draining into like a really tough spot, at the side of your house, you could consider trying to, put it maybe at a different corner, where we can kind of better manage that water. So starting from that really like early beginning kind of planning stage is what we can also do, in the first rain garden visit. Um, yeah, I'll just keep going, Taylor. Yeah, there's no preference for backyard or front yard for the rain garden. Um, both are totally fine.
I just want to go back to the eligibility question with adding a downspout. So I think we prefer to have the construction they're going to do done before we start the rain garden rebate process. Is that right, Ryan? Yeah, because I think we would have to reevaluate your eligibility after we've had some people who will start doing it 1 year, but then they are doing construction. They actually have to reapply the next year and do the process again. So it might just be easier if you already know that you're going to do that construction to get that done first and then apply to the program. But we do these visits, yeah, kind of throughout the summer as well. So depending on timing, we could still have a spot this year.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, that makes sense to me, Taylor.
Okay, I think yeah. Any other questions for Ryan or I? What's been your favorite rain garden plant to use, Ryan? That'll be a question I'll ask you.
Oh,
Or do you have a favorite?
no, that's the hardest question tonight. Um, okay, I would say, um, bee balm, Monarda fistulosa. It it has just a cool flower, but it's also just good because it's a very flexible plant. It can handle, a lot of sun, or it can handle part shade. Um, and it also has a pretty cool, seed head, in the fall. You had that slide about kind of the silhouettes of seed heads. And so that's kind of another like aesthetic interest. Um, but yeah, I could talk forever about these plants. So maybe I'll save that for the rain garden visits. Um, but yeah, I'll just say, I'll let you finish, Taylor. But thanks everyone for listening, and I look forward to meeting you.
Yes, I think that's it. But yeah, if you have any questions, I don't have our email up there, but it's rain@reepgreen.ca. You can also just pop us an email anytime. And I will, if you've registered for the webinar on Eventbrite, I'll send a message with a recording and then also kind of that rain garden plant list and a link to your first visit. But yeah, hopefully, uh, yeah, Ryan can come to your house and help you build a rain garden this year. You can get some money for it. Okay, thanks everyone.